Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so pleased that Pilnet asked me to introduce Bang Todung Mulya Lubis. My name is Alghiffari. I'm a director of Jakarta Legal Aid Institute. Pilnet asked me to introduce Bang Todung that I know very well. Bang Todung is our alumni of Jakarta Legal Aid Institute and also alumni of Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation. He got his degree from University of Indonesia and 2 master degrees from Harvard Law School and then also University of California. And then he got his PhD from University of California as well. And he has many contributions to establish many human rights organizations, and for example, like Contrast, and also Indonesia Corruption Watch, Transparency International Indonesia, and also TIFA. He had many contributions to those organizations. And although he has quite a big law firm, corporate law firm, he's still active in public interest advocacy. He's one of the champions to abolish death penalty in Indonesia, and also he is coordinator of prosecutor in Indonesia International People's Tribunal on 1965-1966 massacre in The Hague. So there was a mass massacre in Indonesia that killed around 1 million Indonesian because stigmatized as communists. That's why Bang Todung also stigmatized as communist. And what else? Another information is the most important. Bang Todung is one of the lawyers in the world that has most followers on Twitter. Maybe that's the most important information. He has around 439,000 followers on Twitter. So please welcome Bang Todung. Thank you.
Thank you, Algif. Thank you for very nice introduction. Justice Kirby, I met you a long time ago. I visited your office probably back in 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. I've been invited to come to this gathering to present what they called Endnote speech. It is indeed a great honor for me to be invited to this very important gathering where so many lawyers and pro bono advocates from so many countries are present. Frankly, I've never participated in previous gatherings, and being here in the last 2 days, it has greatly awakened me to do more pro bono advocacy, because doing pro bono advocacy seems to be an inherent part of the duty of every lawyer. I thank you, the organizers, for persuading me to come to Bali to attend this very important event. Dear friends, I've always loved Bali, an island of paradise and beauty, a place to get away from the worst traffic in Jakarta. I know some of you have been in Jakarta. And this time I have the opportunity to share my thoughts and experience, while at the same time learning from you as well. I've been practicing law more than 40 years. I'm not that young anymore. When I was still a law student at the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia, I was asked to join Institute of Legal Aid, the office of Algif, Jakarta office, And I worked as assistant to the president of the Institute of Legal Aid. And I must admit that I learned a great deal from all the works that came to LBH. As you know, at LBH, legal aid was provided for the poor, underrepresented, and marginalized people. Those who cannot afford lawyers and meet all administrative requirements can come to LBH for pre-legal assistance, where a group of young lawyers are ready to represent them. Those who lost their land because of development project came to LBH. Those who have been fired came to LBH for legal aid. Students who have been detained because of their involvement in public demonstration came to LBH for legal aid. Journalists and political prisoners did come to LBH to take legal action against the governments who deprived them of their political rights. Legal aid at that time was not called pro bono, but essentially what LBH has done have always been pro bono or pro bono publico. What does pro bono publico mean? In the dictionary of legal terms, pro bono publico refers to works for the public good and welfare. When an attorney takes a case without compensation to advance a social cause or to fill a perceived social needs, to offer legal representation to the poor, the attorney represents the party pro bono publico. Definition of pro bono publico is similar to definition of legal aid under Indonesian law. Although later on, LBH broadened the definition of legal aid to also cover cases which, according to LBH, were considered constitutionally important or significant. That explains why LBH, for instance, defended student activists, political prisoners, and the media, who themselves may not necessarily be poor, but their cases are considered as constitutionally important. Or in other words, their cases will influence democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Indonesia does not have a long history of pro bono practices. This does not mean that advocates were only introduced after independence in 1945. Under colonial occupations, Indonesia, or what's called the Hindia Belanda, did have advocates practicing law even though they were small in numbers, and most of them were non-Indonesians. There have not been many research and publications about legal practices under colonial times, except by few Dutch scholars, and lately by Daniel Aslav, a noted Indonesianist who graduated from Cornell University. Having said that, it would not be an understatement if I said that the tradition of pro bono practices was not really rooted in our legal profession. This does not mean that earlier advocates in Indonesia had no idea about pro bono practices. For your information, early advocates of first generation of practicing lawyers were the ones involved in fighting against colonialism, and they knew the suffering of the people. They understood poverty and injustice. They understood the limited access to justice. Individually, the advocates did take up cases on behalf of the poor, underrepresented, and marginalized people. It was a sporadic and unorganized action where no concerted efforts on the part of the lawyers' community existed. That explains why the advocates were perceived by the society as an elite dedicating most of their time defending the rich and the powerful, justice has never been on the side of the poor, underrepresented, and marginalized people. The Indonesian Bar Association was formed for the first time in 1964 in a small town by the name of Solo. It had not that many members at that time, but it was the beginning of emergence of professional practicing lawyers following the footsteps of other bar associations in other countries. Slowly but sure, the development of bar association managed to attract more young graduates from local law school, and eventually, the bar associations became a grouping of so many lawyers practicing law and providing legal services to the society, including the poor and those who had no access to justice. In 1969, in the National Conference of Lawyers, a proposal was introduced that was to start initiating an establishment of Institute of Legal Aid in Jakarta, which later on became known as LBH Jakarta, or LBH Jakarta. It was in 1971 that LBH Jakarta came into being, where the Indonesian Bar Association, together with the government of Jakarta municipality, agreed to lay the grounds for legal aid services to the poor and the needy, to those who cannot afford lawyers. It was at that time young idealistic and energetic lawyers were recruited to be pioneered working as public defenders. They worked full-time and received monthly remunerations, albeit the amount of remuneration was far below average remunerations received by private commercial lawyers working in a law firm and commercial companies. But they were enthusiastic, hardworking, and proud of their accomplishments. Interestingly, they became the role model for young lawyers, and their names appeared in various newspapers and magazines. For the poor, the young public defenders was perceived as their heroes and savior. They became the inspiration for law students who aspired to be public defenders. And along this line, the law school established legal aid offices as part of their service to the society. It was from 1971, a new generation of young public defenders came to the emerging and growing presence of advocates in this country. Unfortunately, Bar Association failed to unite their programs and agenda due to various competing interests among bar associations. I'm saying bar association in the plural sense, unlike in other countries where most of them dominated by one single bar. As you know, since 1970s, there have been at least 10 bar associations established, and that helped create competing interests, which resulted in slowing down in the development of public defenders. It seems that each bar association had its own agenda, inevitably leading to poor coordination and synergy among growing public defenders in Indonesia. That explains why, at one point, the government attempted to unite all bar associations, and in 1985, a new National Bar Association came into being, although a few years later, that single National Bar Association, as predicted, faced open internal conflicts, thereby splitting it into a number of bar associations. There's been widely shared opinion among senior advocates who believe in one single bar and kept pushing for reuniting the so-called National Bar Associations. And it was accomplished when a new law on advocates was promulgated. The Bar Association entered into agreements stipulating that they agreed to temporarily reunite on the condition that there will be the National Congress of Advocates to further discuss and deliberate on the structures and format of the Second National Bar Association. The National Congress of Advocates has never been held, and on the contrary, new conflicts and tension arose, leading to further disintegration and discord. Up to this moment, the attempt to reunite multiple bar associations has failed. And it is my conviction that under our circumstances, a multi-bar seems to be the appropriate choice for Indonesia. Let all the bar associations compete with one another, provided they agree to have an agreement on the standard of training, bar exams, and ethics compliance. Pro bono, were it to grow, requires solid and strong support and commitment of bar associations, as well as the governments. That is what is lacking in Indonesia. I keep saying that the legal profession does have social responsibility, especially to the poor, underrepresented, and marginalized people. And pro bono services is one way of fulfilling that social responsibility to the community. It is my observation that our bar association have paid relatively significant attention to the development of pro bono services. The legal profession, in my opinion, stands behind the rich and the powerful, becoming money machine and forgetting their social responsibility. It is no surprise then if many people cynically criticize legal profession as defending those who paid, not defending who are right. Having said all of that, it is not my intention to say that no pro bono services are emerging and developing. There are small groups of advocates who are allocating some of their time to do pro bono works. However, since all the pro bono works originated from law firms and solo practitioners, therefore, we should not expect any impressive development of pro bono advocates. In my own law firms, for instance, we have a small division consisting of few lawyers who do pro bono works. We provided legal assistance to religious minorities who have been discriminated against, journalists who face harassment from authorities, and those who were sentenced to death. We defended two Australian who were involved in drug trafficking and executed last year. And there are a few others people facing that sentence in Indonesia at the moment for what I call wrongful judgment. Yeah. We did also provide pro bono work for people who defended animal rights. A few other law firms also offer pro bono works. But with a country like Indonesia, with population of over 250 million, where more than half are still considered poor, underrepresented, and marginalized, the need to have more advocates offering pro bono works is a must. Providing pro bono works for those who are not fortunate enough in order for them to find justice, to me, is a constitutional obligation. Isn't it true that the ultimate objective of our independence is to bring justice to the people? This pro bono forum in Bali is not only timely, but undoubtedly very important for the legal profession in Indonesia. This forum serves as a wake-up call for Indonesian advocates to broaden their perspective, to do more public goods, to have empathy to the people who have no access to justice. This is the time for Indonesian advocates to take the side of the justice seekers, not to be selfish and egoistic, going after money, enriching themselves while ignoring their social responsibility to people at large. In addition, it is the inherent duty of advocates to help strengthen the foundations of the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. The fact that we have rule of law, human rights, and democracy would contribute a great deal to more avenues by which to seek justice and to make all people realize that justice belongs to everyone, not only to a privileged few. In this forum, there are so many sessions focusing on various interesting subject matters, which are important for every society, for every advocate and bar associations. We all can learn from countries where the tradition for pro bono has been well established, in which bar associations require law firms and lawyers to allocate a portion of their time to do pro bono works. In some countries, there is a tendency where the average hours spent for pro bono works have gradually increased, and that gives advocates and law firms intellectual and emotional satisfaction, in the sense that they feel worthy and useful to society. Like it or not, the real challenge of every advocate and law firm is to strike a balance between serving paying clients on one hand and advocating on behalf of the poor, underrepresented, and marginalized people on the other hand. How could you not feel satisfied if migrant workers or victims of human trafficking that you defended won the case against the greedy mafia for what they have done brutally and cruelly to the victims, robbing them of their money arbitrarily? Indonesia, the Philippines, India, and Bangladesh, for instance, are all faced against workers and human trafficking problems. Instead of doing it individually and nationally, we might as well be doing it together through a network through which we can coordinate and share what sort of collective action that has to be taken. Through such networks, perhaps PhilNet, among others, extra-legal works can reasonably be discussed before pursuing it. Bringing bar association to the pictures would certainly be appropriate in the sense that it would give more weight to the pro bono works. Combining legal advocacy and extra-legal works, in my experience, has been quite effective and satisfactory. There are many pressing problems faced by minority groups, women, LGBT, and children, and most of them have been discussed in this forum. I'm sure you have exchanged ideas and experience between one another, and undoubtedly, those people need our commitment to assist them. There have always been radical and fundamentalist elements within the society that impose their own rules and restrictions, not to mention intimidation and terror. And in Indonesia, Ahmadiyah, Baha'i, Jewish, Shia, for instance, have been harassed by the conservative Muslim. Christian as well. There have been so many churches burned in some part of the countries. In some regions, Ahmadiyya people have been killed and forced to seek sanctuary, and some Christian churches have been burned in various places. I myself have been involved in advocating on behalf of those minorities. It is not surprising to me to hear accusations directed against me of being anti-Muslim or defiant Muslim. But this is the price that I have to pay for upholding the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. Women, children, LGBT, and disabled people also face serious and systematic discrimination in terms of employment opportunity, access to school, medical services, and others. Their voices have not come across, not heard by presidents, ministers, and parliamentarians. Domestic violence occurs every day. Stigmas have been imposed against those LGBT people as if they are abnormal and insane. Rape against children has also occurred everywhere. And interestingly, most of them have never been reported. Those affected by discrimination and violence prefer not to open their cases to the public. They don't want to face further retaliation and terror. In my humble opinion, it is our duty as members of the legal profession to provide pro bono legal assistance to those who are in need. Again, in this respect, bar association must do their utmost to support all pro bono advocates in performing their social legal responsibility to the community. Having said all of those things, I now come to my final closing. For me, this is the time for the legal profession in Asia, including my own country, Indonesia, to realize that the legal profession is indebted to the country, to the people. A debt has to be repaid, and this debt has long been overdue for payment. Pro bono legal service is one of the answers, and I urge every bar association to require each and every advocate to allocate part of their time to pro bono legal service of their own choice, either individually or jointly. My bar associations, ICADIN, has legal aid offices in every province that were assigned to provide pro bono legal services to the needy. I urge other bar associations to do the same. This is not in any way, however, a guarantee that justice can be delivered to the needy, but we can proudly say that we, as members of the legal profession, cannot escape from our own social responsibility. Thank you so much.